They say trends come back into prominence after a 20, 30, 40-year lull. We're getting the 1980s anti-gay fear-mongering, borderline satanic panic stuff rolling right over again. And I think that, like, my main goal, I think, in talking about this has been trying to convince people that underlying all of the bad faith attacks on trans people and queer people or whatever is a genuine, like, genocidal intent. So I want to watch this with you, okay? A little sit down. Members of Moms for Liberty, red flags abound, the group actively banning books across the country, you can probably guess which books, terrorizing queer kids, and taking over school boards, calling for LGBTQ kids to be put in separate classrooms like kids with autism and Down syndrome. Let's watch. This is on MSNBC, by the way. This isn't some little YouTube stint we're doing. That's the MSNBC logo right there.
That the kids that do have they're confused. Not everybody is
Sorry.
I was just thinking.
Volume's too low. There you
go. That the kids that do have they're confused or they are gay or whatnot, that the way that they're trying to go about it is to make it an open conversation, an open thing in classrooms. But like, for example, children with autism, Down syndrome, they have to have special IEP meetings with a counselor. They have to be put into separate classrooms. And I understand because it's a different type of education for children with those disabilities, but I think that for children that identify differently, there should also be like a specialized something for them so that they feel that they're important enough that they're being counseled.
And why not have that conversation that you're explaining in front of everyone?
I think for the same reason why teachers wouldn't just bring a child with autism in front of the class and be like, hey, he's got autism. Mm-hmm. Embarrassment.
But what is, in your eyes, embarrassing about being gay?
It's not that it's something to be embarrassed about, but I'm sure that you understand a lot of kids that are young and feel gay, some of them are shamed.
Because they can't openly talk about it in their classroom.
Right, which I understand, but there's just a way to go about it. That everybody is respected.
If any of you had like abusive narcissistic moms, you're probably getting some crazy like flashback, nostalgia feelings right now from the way this behavior is being signaled. Oh yeah, demon behavior here, going to hell for sure. A couple of obvious things to cover here. The only ableism we engage in here is ableism against people with bottom physiology and people who disagree with me, which is a mental disorder. We have nothing against people with autism or Down syndrome here. However, I think it's fair to understand that a comparison between Down syndrome and being gay or trans is not a charitably intended one, especially since this is being done in the context of like, you should have separate accommodations. The comparison being drawn, from the get-go. But more than that, like, people need to understand this, right? Because I keep getting these... It's not as bad now because I'm always right, and people are being sort of moved over to my position with time. And I'll admit that this is a frustration that I've largely had with liberals adjacent to, like, other communities online. Genocides don't begin with somebody, like, flipping a coin and then just deciding to lead people to camps. There is a systemic process of dehumanization and ostracization that goes into it. It's like the stages of genocide. It never begins with the deaths, like you categorize people separately. You need to have an in-group and an out-group, and that's been done. That's already done. That work was done a long time ago. But you need to give meaning to that distinction. You have to create justifications for separation. A good example of ostracization from public space would be efforts to keep trans people from using their bathrooms in public spaces. If there's a trans woman who can't use the woman's restroom, let's be real. Have you seen trans women? Shouldn't be going in the men's restroom either. A lot of potential violence in there. It sucks, but that's how it is. An effort to keep trans people from using the restroom of their choice in public is an effort to keep them from using any restroom. outside of the gender neutral ones they might come across, which, I'm glad if they're there, but it's still a serious issue. Ostracization from public space is like a core part of genocidal ideology, because the more out of sight, out of mind people are, the easier it is to make up stories about them, and the easier it is to make up stories about them, the easier it is to attack, denigrate them, to create justifications for violence against them. Like think for example, post 9/11. Do you guys remember there being very much Muslim representation in American media at around the 9/11 time period, outside attacks on Muslims for 9/11? See, prior to 9/11, Muslims weren't that regarded a group in the US. Like, not a crazy amount of hate, not a crazy amount of love, just, they're a group here, whatever. 9/11 happens, obviously the chips are thrown down. We decide the only way to avenge our 9/11 brethrens is to be incredibly Islamophobic. But in the absence of any, like, just regular Muslim people in media, it's really difficult to, like, undo that attitude. And hate crimes against Muslims increased dramatically after 9/11, not just in America, but in the West as well. Right now, hate crimes are up against LGBT people. Hate crimes are rising as anti-LGBT legislation passes. Does this have data to pull from, or a collection of news stories? I just see a collection of news stories. Here, from Vice, from 4 days ago. Perfect. 4 days ago. Exclusive, massive rise in anti-LGBTQ hate crime reports in UK. Okay, UK, that's totally applicable. Very similar trends happening in the UK as well. Oh, yikes. New data showed 26.8 thousand reports of hate crimes based on sexual orientation, compared to 10,000 in 2016 to 17, a 168% increase. So 2.6 times as many hate crimes based on sexual orientation. The biggest rise ever recorded by a huge margin. Yes, it wasn't just Muslims who were attacked. It was all brown people and anyone wearing a turban, because Americans are stupid. That is true. But remember, this is still just the precursor. The Night of Broken Glass was a precursor to the real discrimination, right? Even in Nazi Germany, the Nazis didn't just immediately do the genocide. They spent years building up propaganda, dehumanizing narratives about the Jews and the homosexuals and the disabled and what have you. They took their time, and by the time they finally did start sending people to camps, let's be real, the Germans knew what was going on, okay? They're not stupid, right? Oh, all your Jewish neighbors disappeared, and meanwhile the radio's blaring about how they're parasites and cockroaches. Yeah, great. Very subtle. Thank you. Yeah, they knew. Just because they didn't know all the details doesn't mean they didn't know. They may have pretended not to after the war, but they knew. And that's a well-settled fact historically. They just didn't care. They just didn't care. Because they'd spent years being propagandized to by the Nazi government. They'd been conditioned to sort of turn their eyes away from it. And I gotta say, if you are interested in ostracizing and dehumanizing a group of people, a really good way to start would be keeping them out of your classrooms. So not only can you not teach about their history, not only can you not teach about their experience or what they suffer from or anything going on with them, like culturally or politically, you don't even have to see them. It's worth noting that for a lot of people, school is the first place they meet people different to them, right? Because before school, a lot of young people just know their family and maybe a couple of family friends. School is the first time you're really, forced to meet new people and confront biases that you've had about those groups of people, It sounds dumb to say, but flat out, there are literally right now in America millions of white children who first met a black person at school. They'd probably heard about black people before, and then finally they met one. And it is an undeniable fact that actually encountering a member of a group you've heard stories about is likely to moderate your opinion significantly. Because it's good. That being around people different than you makes you more considerate, cultured, respectful person. That's why they don't want intermingling. Bigoted governments, from time immemorial, have prevented intermingling socially between different classes of people. It has been prohibited through law. It's been prohibited culturally. It's been shamed, ostracized, implicitly denounced, and explicitly. Because the more communion there is between different groups, the more likely it is they will eventually get along. That's not always the case, but that's definitely an important factor, especially when we're talking about something as inarguably harmless as having gay children in classrooms. Yeah, anyway. You guys get the point, don't you? If this group is large enough to get speaking time on MSNBC, like, this isn't some little thing, you know, this is the Moms for Liberty website. I have no doubt that they're getting funding from political orgs. As you can see, all of these counties are areas where they have a chapter. Hundreds of them. Or at least 100? Maybe 100. I don't want to count. They're all over the place. I believe they started in Florida. Yes, I do appreciate the John Adams quote down here, liberty once lost is lost forever, while they argue to literally segregate queer children